One of the most polarizing subjects at present in the political sphere is that of delimitation. Delimitation of constituencies is a constitutional requirement and is supposed to happen after the ongoing census exercise is over. However, there is a huge political divide over delimitation, and it is primarily in the nature of north south divide. We have with us eminent political scientist and activist Dr. Yogendra Yadav to discuss the issue of delimitation, what makes it so complicated, and can these complications be resolved? Thank you so much, Dr. Yadav, for joining us to discuss the issue of delimitation. Now, before sir, we go on to discussing the implications of delimitation happening and the complications that are involved with it, how do you look at the freeze that has been there on delimitation since 1976? And what are the implications of the exercise not having taken place for such a long period of time?
First of all, let me clarify that what we call delimitation in India, what is called redistricting in some other countries, involves three different things. Some people have a problem with one component, some are talking about the other component. So let's be clear about that right in the beginning. Number one, it involves reallocation of the number of seats to different states in the Lok Sabha and to different regions or districts within an assembly. Number two, it involves fresh drawing of boundaries. Whatever the number, you draw the boundaries afresh. Number three, it involves changing or deciding on which constituencies are to be reserved in the case of SC or ST, and possibly in future in the case of women. These three decisions put together are called delimitation. Much of the discussion in our recent context has focused only on the first part, and within the first part, only of one half of the first part, which is reallocation of seats for different states within the Lok Sabha. But please remember, delimitation requires many, and the problems are of many kinds. Now, the freeze that you talk about is a freeze that was put in 1976. The Constitution said that after every 10 years, delimitation should take place. All these three exercises should happen afresh. It happened twice. After 1971 delimitation, 72 delimitation, the Lok Sabha said that the constitutional amendment was passed to say, for 25 years, we freeze all these three things. Why? Because at that time, family planning was the big thing. And many states said, well, you are asking us for family planning and you are punishing us for that because of this delimitation exercise. So it was agreed. 25 years later, when Mr. Vajpayee was in power, the first thing happened during the emergency. It was a very controversial period of Indian political history. The second thing happens when Mr. Vajpayee is in power, 25 years freeze is over. Mr. Vajpayee has to decide. So what does he say? He says, okay, we continue the freeze of the first part of the first exercise, but everything else is not frozen. Please remember that after 2001, there was a delimitation in 2006-7, where the remaining 2.5 exercises were undertaken. That is to say, the reallocation of seats for different districts within a state did happen. Fresh drawing of boundaries, as everyone would recall, actually did happen. Delhi had 7 seats earlier, continued to have 7 seats. But the boundary of something called Outer Delhi was changed, something called East Delhi was changed. So fresh boundaries were drawn, and fresh allocation of which seats are to be reserved and unreserved was already done. The only thing that was frozen was allocation of seats in the Lok Sabha for different states. Under that period, the consensus was, all right, we continue with this for another 25 years. Uh, was it good? On the face of it, it violates the democratic principle of one person, one vote, one value. Because ideally, every elector in this country should be representing, should have the same weight of their vote, which is to say, the number of persons represented by every member of parliament should roughly be the same. That's a principle. It's a democratic principle. And my first reaction in 2001 was, why are you violating a democratic principle? Why don't you allow things to happen? But now that I look back, and over the last many years, my position has been that actually this freeze was not a bad idea. And that instead of kicking the can for another 25 years every time, we should just cast it in stone. It should be made a permanent freeze. It's been my consistent position that whatever the allocation of seats, which is to say proportions, if you want to increase the overall size by retaining the proportions, that doesn't matter to me very much. The proportions do matter. The ratio of different states in the parliament. That should be retained because there is the other principle, other than democratic principle, there is the federal principle. There is an unwritten code. There is an unwritten social contract, and all contracts of that kind are always unwritten. There's an unwritten federal compact in India. The federal compact is about non-domination. No one region of the country be allowed to dominate. So in this particular instance, to my mind, let's be honest, there is a democratic principle that does get violated, but there is a federal principle which in this instance must be allowed to trump over the democratic principle. That's my position.
So, do you feel that we need to rethink or take a relook at this constitutional principle of one person, one vote, one value?
No. Within each state, the same principle must apply. But please remember, the Constitution and the existing law has always permitted deviations from this principle. Arunachal Pradesh, all the small states in the country, Arunachal Pradesh probably put together would be the size of 2 assembly constituencies of UP. Why does it have 2 parliamentary seats? The entire area of Ladakh would be smaller than a town in Haryana. The population. Why does it have a state to itself, a parliamentary constituency? Because Constitution recognized that this broad principle needs to allow for what is technically called, we have a federalism which is asymmetrical, which is to say the same rule is not applied across all the states. We have special situations are accommodated for. But these were exceptions. What I'm speaking about is now something that changes the rule in one sense, that you actually freeze it. Like in the US, you are a small state, you are a big state, you get 2 seats in the Senate, and the Senate is the most powerful body in the US. Uh, my sense is that no, we don't need to revisit that principle in general. Within each state, yes, the principle should be followed. For all other things, it should be followed. However, in the case of seats in the Lok Sabha, let's agree on a compact. And my reasons are the following. Uh, in every country, the classic principle is that if you have divisions which cross-cut each other, they do not pose a very serious threat. So, for example, you have caste division and then you have gender. Within every caste, there are gender differences. So, they do not collapse with each other. They are not overlapping. They do not cause a threat of unity. But if there are two divisions which are very overlapping, at one point, caste and class, for example, that's a problem. Now, in our country, we already have 3 overlapping divisions. One is geographical, south versus north. Second is linguistic, Hindi, non-Hindi. Now, they are not identical, but all the states of south fall in one category. All the states in the north fall broadly in one category, with 1 or 2 exceptions, Punjab, etc. The third division that has emerged in the last 20 years, which is what made me change my mind, is the economic division. If you draw a line between Ahmedabad and Hyderabad, every state on this side of the divide is a second world country. And every state on this side of the divide is a very poor third world country, again with minor exceptions. Now, these 3 divides broadly overlap. That's not good news at all for any country. And on top of it, if you put a fourth divide, which is states which would benefit from delimitation and states would lose from delimitation, that is inviting trouble. So, as someone who would put national unity paramount, I would say that therefore this be allowed to trump other considerations for this very special reason, because in the last instance, it's about national unity. Please remember who would be the beneficiaries and losers of delimitation, reallocation of seats due to delimitation. Here are the losers: Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Odisha, Bengal, Punjab.
Punjab too. Mm.
Do you see a pattern in this? It overlaps exactly with the three divisions that I've already spoken of. You know, now this is why you don't want it. I'm not saying someone has done a conspiracy and designed the beneficiaries and losers in such a way as to discriminate against someone. No, this is strictly according to population. But to my mind, we must recognize that this cleavage, this division, almost coincides with other divisions. And therefore, in the larger national interests, it is just not a sensible move to try and enforce this reallocation in the name of a democratic principle.
You spoke about the need to maintain national unity and the divisions that, are being talked about in the backdrop of the delimitation debate. The foremost divide that we see is that of the north-south, north versus south. And in the past, you've spoken about the need to not look at the issue from the north versus south prism. If you could elaborate on that.
Uh, you know, it's being presented as the north-south division, but when I spoke of the four cleavages, they're not exactly north-south. For example, the Hindi, non-Hindi is not north-south. There's east and there's west, which also is not Hindi-speaking area. When I spoke of the economic cleavage, both Gujarat and Maharashtra fall in the status of the beneficiaries. When I speak, and then East, all the Eastern non-Hindi speaking states are still very, very poor. So it's not only North and South, but it so happens that if you look at these four cleavages, geographical, linguistic, economic, and now political, all the states of South India fall this side of the divide, and all the Hindi speaking states of North India, which is called the Hindi heartland, they're all on the other side, again, with the minor exception of Uttarakhand and Himachal. Now, this is what worries me. Look, there is a real north south question in India. Uh, Sometimes it's accentuated, sometimes it is not. There was a time just after partition of the country, after independence, when the question acquired very intense form in Tamil Nadu. But gradually and over the years, that has subsided. And it's a great achievement of our democracy that it has. And one of the reasons why it subsided was that Indian democracy accepted and recognized diversities, that a Dravid party was allowed to rule over Tamil Nadu, that a Tamil Desham, demand for Tamil Desham by Tamil Desham party, all right, you can't rule the units. They were not called anti-national. They were not disqualified. It is that legitimate expression of regional differences, which is the heart of the success of Indian nation state. Please do remember, the diversities in India are more than the diversities of the ex-Soviet Union. The diversities within the northeast of India are more than the entire Yugoslavian thing. Please remember, where is Yugoslavia today? Please remember, where is Soviet Union today? Why did India survive? India has survived not because of some authoritarian control from the top. India has survived not because it insisted on uniformity. We have survived because we adopted a very different, a very non European approach to the whole problem. Because we said, if you are different, that's all right. I will never ask you, are you a Tamil or are you an Indian? I will always accept that you are Tamil and you are Indian. You are Indian because you are Tamil, And I would never ask you this question. Now, this is at the heart of the South North issue. To my mind, this in India, we have reached a moment which I call the Dakshinayan moment. It is a moment for the rest of India to learn from the South. South India has witnessed some of the greatest democratic experiments, strongest social justice movements, some of the best implementation of welfare schemes, some of the uh, some of the most nuanced approach to the issue of reservations. This is the moment to learn from South India. And if this moment is utilized for transitional temporary political gains in order to push the majority of North, this would not be a good news for India.
You spoke about the concerns of the southern states, especially with regard to perhaps the cultural dominance of the Hindi heartland. Uh, they fear that their linguistic and cultural identities could be under threat. So, what needs to be done to assuage these concerns, and why do you think these concerns have arisen? Is it because of the political dynamics that we have seen in recent years?
Look, some of these concerns predate this. Those who came from South India to the North found a bit of hostility and unease. Um, Very often, those who did not speak Hindi and came to the national capital were made to look small because they could not speak Hindi. Uh, Officially, Hindi is not recognized as the national language. But the number of times someone would barge into some of my friends and say, "Why can't you speak Hindi? Hindi is a national language." These things people register, just as people who come from the Northeast register a racial discrimination when they come to the North. So some of these things have predated. But the overall political consensus was that we would not press this. So that attenuated all these day to day interactions and problems. The overall political consensus accepted it all. And in fact, the dominance of regional parties from 90s and for 20 years, that actually was a beautiful phase for Indian federalism because everyone felt that, we are ruling in Delhi, which is a lovely thing for everyone to feel that we are ruling or we can potentially be the ruler of this country. That's a lovely feeling for every community, every state to have. It did. In the last 10 years, we have a party which is excessively dependent on North India, Hindi heartland. Add Maharashtra and Gujarat to that because they are seen to be extensions of Hindi heartland. They never seem to be, as different as, say, Tamil Nadu is or as Bengal is. So a party which is politically dependent on these areas and which is ideologically aligned with the project of nation state that demands uniformity, one nation, one language, one race. This is a classic European formula. And no one is more European in this than the RSS because they actually, for them, the dream is to create a Italy or German kind of nationalism. So both in terms of its vested interests and in terms of its ideology, we have a party, we have a dominant party system right now which believes in pushing uh, uniformity and which stands to gain by pushing uniformity, which stands to gain by making uh, North Indian Hindi heartland be the political center of this country. This is what has now pushed that divide to a more prominent one. I would still not say we've reached any uh, crack point. No, we have not. I would not say that this crack has become a divide. No, fortunately, it has not. But we are at a very critical juncture where it can become a divide. And anyone who thinks about nations must not think about the next 5 years. Please think about next 50, if not next 500. And if you want to think of that, then you don't want to push this delimitation to give a message to a large number of Indians who, in any case, have been feeling slightly uneasy. A message that you're not really valued. That's not a message you want to send, especially to the south of India.
There is also the financial aspect. It is there's a lot of dissatisfaction amongst the southern states that they contribute more in terms of revenue, but the funds that are devolved to them is lower compared to the other states because of their population. So how do you look at that?
I happen to have a very different opinion on this issue. Much of what I have said would be probably music to the ears of my friends in South India. What I'm going to say now will not be. But as I said, I look at all these things from the point of view of long term interests of the nation. To my mind, what we need is a dual deal. I've spelled out one part of the deal. First part of the deal is that frees political representation as it existed in 1971. Don't touch it. Increase the numbers if you want to, don't touch the ratios. The second part of the deal is share benefits of prosperity with everyone. We have, and that's the spirit of a nation, that's the spirit of a family. We have had extremely uneven development in this country. Some states have been beneficiaries of that development, which is not to say that they were more hardworking and others were less hardworking, which is not to say that it's their effort alone which has resulted in this. If Punjab and a certain part of Haryana and Western UP have done excessively well in terms of agriculture, it is to do with state policy. It is to do with national resources being allocated to these regions. If certain parts of South India have done well, it has to do with the past, it has to do with some progressive government, but it also has to do with larger state policies in this. So, to my mind, belonging to a nation must require that we share our resources. The states in the north and the east, mind you, it's not a Hindi versus non Hindi question. The poorest states of this country continue to be Jharkhand, Odisha, Bengal, and Assam. Some of them are Hindi, some of them are non Hindi speaking, and of course, Bihar along with that, and parts of eastern UP. Now, to my mind, the existing formula of devolution of economic resources, which is the formula under the Finance Commission, basically the formula says, while you contribute to the national kitty, you do not get equal share from the national kitty, not in proportion to your population, not in proportion to what you had contributed. You get it according to your need. And the poorest state have greater need, they will be given more. Now, just as I advocate a freeze on the delimitation, I also advocate a freeze on this formula. This formula must be continued, which is to say, poorer states of the East and North India, Hindi and non-Hindi, must continue to get greater proportion of the national resources so that they develop well. Of course, those resources should be utilized better than they are. And of course, some of that should be tied to more incentivized to do better themselves. So there is an argument for using those resources more efficiently, but this transfer must be done. So I'm speaking of a threefold federal compact in India. One is a political part, the other is an economic part, and third is a cultural part. No imposition of any one religion or language on anyone else. That is to say, no imposition of majority Hindu religion, no really imposition of Hindi, which is not a majority language, but the largest language of this country, no imposition at all. And I say this as an advocate of a three language formula. I have consistently maintained that purely pedagogically for a country like India, three language formula is a good formula, which is to say, Hindi, English, and any one, and of course, this regional language. Now, the problem with, and I know it is very strongly opposed, especially in Tamil Nadu. And recently, the new chief minister has also expressed his opposition to that. I completely understand their opposition because they are saying, look, you impose a three language formula on me, but you never follow a three language formula. Please remember, the three language formula required North Indian states to learn non Hindi languages, preferably a language from South India. That's what it was written in the original formula. Which North Indian state has implemented that? None. Has Haryana started reading Telugu? No. Is Tamil the language being taught in Uttar Pradesh? No. They circumvented, brought in Sanskrit, not because of any love for a classical language, but as a simple way of circumventing the policy. So I completely understand their opposition in this state. I completely understand their resolve to say, look, there is no national language. You cannot impose Hindi on us. So I'm entirely with them, and that has to be written into this federal compact. You cannot impose. All other pedagogical things are wonderful. I'm personally for a three-language formula. I personally believe that a child can easily learn four distinct languages. It's never a problem. We should promote multilinguality, but not by imposing Hindi on the rest of the country. Non-imposition, non-domination should be the essence of the new federal compact.
I want to ask you about Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu, declaring a policy to incentivize larger families in the backdrop of the state limitation debate and the concern over, their population dipping. So, how do you look at this kind of a response?
Look, when I read the report, I almost laughed at it. Uh, the fact is that population rise and decline does not follow the statements by chief ministers and prime ministers. When population declined in South India, it was not because of any family control policy. The basic logic of demography is that when a society or a community or a region starts doing economically well, when parents feel that they have something to defend and preserve, then they have lesser children. So, all over the world, economic growth, higher lifestyle is associated with lower number of children. Sometimes a draconian state policy like the Chinese policy can change the demographic trend because the policy was so draconian. Normally, to say that in South India the population growth was low because of a effective implementation of family planning, or that in North it is low because of poor implementation, that's not true. And I don't think Andhra Pradesh's overall demographic trends are going to change simply because you announce some 30,000 rupees or whatever. Uh, this is not, these are, to my mind, somewhat gimmicky responses to a real issue. For some reason, it seems Mr. Chandrababu Naidu is not willing to stand up and say, why are you doing this reallocation? It goes against South India. Instead of that, you put the onus on the people and say, start growing more kids. So in any case, something which would influence, I mean, even if it were to start happening from tomorrow, it will affect 2 decades later. To my mind, that's no solution at all. It's a way of evading and running away from the real question that we are facing.
Um, the government recently proposed increasing the number of seats in the Lok Sabha as part of its proposal to immediately implement the women's reservation law. And the proposal involved, maintaining the ratio, the present ratio of the states in the Lok Sabha. The numbers that were cited were the Lok Sabha, the number of seats in the Lok Sabha would go up to around 816, and the ratio of the states in the House would be maintained. Do you think this was a plausible solution to the concerns that exist with regard to delimitation?
First of all, let me underline the complete doublespeak of the government. The government, the prime minister, the home minister kept speaking about everyone, every state getting 1.5 times more than what they have, maintaining the ratio, not disturbing the balance. But the written proposal that they put before the parliament said exactly the opposite. Now, country will not be governed by the statement made by home minister. The country will be governed by the law and constitutional amendment that you pass. The constitutional amendment that the government had put before the parliament, which was defeated, clearly said that allocation will take place as per the census decided by the government. And the delimitation bill that was proposed along with the constitutional amendment clearly said that that census will be the latest census available at the time when delimitation commission is appointed. In other words, once you put these two texts together, they were saying it will happen on the basis of 2011, or if the Delimitation Act Commission is appointed after 2027, then it will be the census of 2027, which actually meant reallocation based on new population figures. So why was the government lying? To my mind, this is plain doublespeak. To this date, no one from the government has clarified that why did your text say exactly the opposite of what you were claiming? Uh, that apart,
Is it a plausible
is it a
formula?
plausible solution? It's not a solution at all to anything, but I don't mind it. You know, if you increase, if you think that the number of seats should be increased, I don't mind it as long as the ratios are maintained. If Kerala goes from 20 to 30, then UP may go from 80 to 120. It doesn't change. Some people thought there was an issue there. I did not see an issue there. The only real issue is something else, which is if Lok Sabha becomes 850 and Rajya Sabha continues to be around 250, then the weight of Rajya Sabha goes down. Because for some crucial, if there is a disagreement between Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, they come together in a joint sitting. And in joint sitting, everyone has one vote. Rajya Sabha does not have equal votes. Already Rajya Sabha is half of Lok Sabha. And in this situation, Rajya Sabha will become one third of Lok Sabha, which violates the federal principle once again. That's the problem with it. Otherwise, there is no unfairness to other states on that. But mind you, it does not solve that problem. This is not a solution to any of the existing problems. So let's think of the real hard question. And let's come to an understanding. Let's have a national consensus, a compact, based on a free and frank discussion about the situation.
Opposition parties have also expressed a sort of mistrust with the present dispensation carrying out the exercise of delimitation. And there are fears that the exercise would be undertaken in such a manner as to, favor the BJP. How do you look at those fears?
It's a very legitimate fear on the part of the opposition. Sometimes in political rhetoric, people say things which don't make sense. But in this particular instance, the opposition's fear is absolutely justified. And it has not to do with the allocation. That's not the real issue. This is about the second and the third part of the delimitation exercise that I spoke right in the beginning. Uh, Drawing of constituency boundaries. Now, we have had a process in India where a judge and the election commission, etc., come together, they form a delimitation commission, and the boundaries are drawn. MPs and MLAs can be witness to that. They are associate members, but they have absolutely no role to play in how the actual boundaries are drawn. We have had minor issues with how boundaries were drawn. I have myself heard murmurs about some politician being favored somewhere in the drawing of seats. That particular assembly segment was attached to that parliamentary constituency, not the other, because it would favor Mr. X. I've heard these styles. But on balance, we did not have a drawing of boundaries so as to systematically favor one party across the country. The opposition fears that this is what will happen this time. Americans have a name for it. This is classic American disease. India was free of this disease. They call it gerrymandering. Basically, in America, the political representative, their equivalent of MLAs and MPs, they themselves draw the boundaries of the next election. So how would they draw it? They would draw it to favor themselves. So they draw weird kinds of shapes in order to ensure that they get re-elected. This process, this defect is called gerrymandering. India was free of gerrymandering so far, but minor exceptions. Gerrymandering has now arrived in India. I said we had delimitation in this country in 2006-7. That was largely free of gerrymandering. But for various technical reasons, Assam, Jammu Kashmir, and Jharkhand were left out of that. I have taken it, and that was done in 2023. So we have a real life example of how delimitation has been carried out during the term of this regime, technically by the Election Commission of India. Here is the map which I have been sitting with. These are maps from Assam. maps of two parliamentary constituencies and assembly segments within them. Just look at that. This blue constituency called Lahariya Ghat. Have you ever seen a constituency of this kind of shape? Here it goes like this, has little thing attached to it, then almost breaks, then goes all the way here, has a little island attached to it. This is gerrymandering. Americans will come and take classes from us as to how to gerrymander better than the Americans have done. Why is this the case? Looks an odd shape, no? The truth is that this look at the blue and the yellow constituencies. This blue constituency was earlier 60% Muslims. The yellow one was probably 40% Muslim. Now, what you do is that you pick up all Muslim areas, all these blue things are Muslim pockets, put them all in this constituency so that instead of 60, it becomes 95% Muslim. So that this one, instead of 40, becomes only 20% Muslim. Earlier, the BJP would have lost both of them. Now they would lose one by bigger margin, but it doesn't matter. Instead of losing a constituency by 20,000, you might as well lose it by 70,000. So as long as you can win the other constituency by some margin. In America, this is called packing. The other is cracking. How do you crack a constituency? This is cracking, the yellow one. How do you crack a constituency into tiny bits so as to splinter those whose votes you are unlikely to get? This has already started. Take a look at the map from Jammu and Kashmir. The map goes over the Himalayas. One constituency has two parts of Himalayas in it. How can that happen? So, gerrymandering has arrived full and proper in India. It has already been experimented in two areas successfully. And this was done not merely in the Hindu-Muslim question. In Assam, out of 126 seats, the chief minister announced before delimitation exercise began that he wants to ensure that the Miyas, he named them, the Miyas should not have influence in more than 20 constituencies of Assam. And at the end of the exercise, he expressed satisfaction and thanked the election commission to ensuring that they were cut down from 36 to 22. What he did not announce was that even Ahomiyas were cut down. What he did not announce was that in areas where his party got more votes, the number of seats in those districts went up. That you have one parliamentary constituency with 12 assembly segments and another parliamentary constituency within Assam with only 6 assembly segments. And this is what has happened there. And then in areas where you simply cannot avoid a Muslim winning the seat, you can make it scheduled caste reserve. This is what they did. This is what has happened. This is what the opposition fears, that this will happen everywhere in the country. So the opposition really dreads the possibility of a delimitation, although technically it would still be done by a judge with election commission. So Mr. Gyanesh Kumar and a judge chosen by the Prime Minister would sit and decide boundaries like this. This is why the opposition doesn't want it. They don't say it. But frankly, this is their fear. The moment in Assam, before the election started, BJP had already won 20 seats. Because in these seats, the demography was changed in such a way that BJP was bound to be the winner. In seats where Muslims could influence the outcome in a decisive way were cut down from 36 to 22. Some people say from 40 to 22. Seats where Ahomiyas could dominate would cut down from, I think, 11 to 7. Seats where Bodos could dominate were increased. Seats where Hindu Bengalis could dominate went up, I think, from 7 to 50. This is what has happened. And unless this can be checked, delimitation would be a death knell for our democracy. So if you have delimitation, if Assam-style delimitation or Assam and Jammu Kashmir-style delimitation becomes the norm, the model, and Bengal style SIR becomes the norm for voter list, you can say goodbye to electoral democracy in this country. That is the fear. This is why the opposition doesn't want it.
So, can we have some sort of safeguards against gerrymandering or manipulation of the redrawing of constituencies in
Yes, we
delimitation?
can have safeguards. Many countries have safeguards. The safeguards can be one in the norms being written into the law. For example, contiguity. What business does this yellow pocket have to be outside this constituency? It's not contiguous. So, contiguity, equal population size across constituencies. You can have rules about administrative boundaries not being violated. In Assam, within one single panchayat, there were 3 assembly constituencies. You can have rules about it. But the best safeguard has to be in the process, because make all rules, people can violate and find ways around those rules. American Supreme Court has been laying rules after rules of gerrymandering, and they find ways to violate it. The process has to be fair, which is to say the selection of the Delimitation Commission and that of the Election Commission of India has to be bipartisan, which it is not. Unless you have that, then all written safeguards amount to nothing.
In the end, I want to ask you, how does one maintain a balance between the principle of every vote having the same value and the need to also, assuage the concerns of the southern states and also other states like Punjab and Himachal and Uttarakhand with regard to delimitation, that their political relevance would not, be affected because of it?
As I said, we need to have an honest conversation. The democratic principle of one person, one vote, one value is a valid principle. By and large, that must prevail. However, in one exceptional situation, and that happens all over the world, in all kinds of places in the world, asymmetrical federalism involves providing for these kinds of very special provisions. Uh, in one space, the federal principle must be given, must trump over the democratic principle. Why? Because there is an underlying principle, that of non dominance. Non dominance has to be the basic principle of our republic. That's a foundational principle. Non dominance in politics, non dominance in economy, non dominance in culture and language. In one case, one party may be the beneficiary, the other may be the loser. In another principle, the earlier beneficiary could become the loser. Doesn't matter. You follow one principle. And to my mind, adoption of that federal compact is the way to move forward.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us your time.
Thank you.